Now that you have the resources already, let's get started. Welcome to Module 3, which is titled Change and Settlement. To get started, I'd like you to think about a time when you experienced a change. Did you start a new job? Did you buy a different vehicle? Maybe you moved to a different neighborhood or something else. Maybe you got married or added someone to your family, or maybe someone important to you passed away. Some of the changes we experience are things we influence, while some changes are directed by others or forces beyond our control. Sometimes we initiate a change, and sometimes someone else is affected, even though they didn't make the change. How we deal with change can be very complicated, and it can have a strong impact on us, whether we initiated the change or whether someone else did. Sometimes we're happy about the change. Sometimes we're not. And we can feel both when change is happening. Maybe you think that change really isn't that big a deal. So let's try an experiment. I'd like you to cross your arms. Now, I want you to uncross them, and I want you to cross them the other way. How does it feel? For some people, it's almost impossible to do. For others, it's not that hard. Now do it one more time. Cross your arms, and then cross them the other way. Was it a bit easier the second time? What did you notice in yourself? How big is the change that I asked you to do? We're often uncomfortable with small changes, and we don't recognize it. The guide and toolkit purpose, and our discussion today, is to help us increase our shared understanding and empathy for the experience of others around change in their lives. Change is hard, and knowing what is happening and how to respond can better equip everyone to recognize how hard it is, to see that even in the simple things, it's hard for some people. Not everyone recognizes or experiences change in the same way. And unlike how we cross our arms, not everyone can influence the changes that are happening in their lives. To better consider how we experience change and how that it could impact a newcomer settling in the Pembina Valley, let's start by thinking about who we are and what makes up our identity. Sometimes we don't think about all of the things that make us who we are and how changes can influence how we see ourselves or how we find that sense of belonging that we've been talking about in other modules. In your workbook on page 3, there is a big orange square, kind of like the one shown on the screen here. Take a moment to write your name in the top left corner. Write a culture you identify in the top right corner. Or if you identify with multiple cultures, you could write those. As an example, if you live in the Pembina Valley, you might identify as Canadian or Manitoban. Or you might include your home country or culture if you were born outside of Canada. You might include a religious faith or culture, or even something else. On the bottom in the middle, I'd like you to write your profession or your career. And in the middle, I want you to think for a moment and write a key message that has been meaningful in your life. Listen to the influential voices that you've had in your family, a teacher, a leader you respect, a friend, or even someone else. You're welcome to pause the workshop video to complete the identity box. What do we learn from this exercise? We learn our life experiences and the messages we take to heart inform our values. We often choose what we will tell others about ourselves based on trust and how safe we feel. Is it okay to share this information? Being curious about ourselves and others and the messages that have helped shape us is a critical component in intercultural competence development. When we move somewhere, the messages may be out of context and may cause struggles that are difficult to define, understand, or accept. What happens when we have difficulty finding our sense of identity when we move to a new place? Imagine that you've been an electrician for 20 years in your home country, and you move to Canada with your family. You know there is a need for electricians because you did your research before you came, and there is a big need for housing across the country. You are excited and ready to build an electrical business. Then you realize you need a special license. You didn't know that before. It's not the same in your home country. As you explore options for certification, you consider the costs that go along with education and the amount of time it takes to achieve your goal. You realize you don't have that time or the money, and you have a family to provide for. So you take a job that doesn't pay as well, so you can take care of your family. And you have to postpone your dream of becoming an electrician in Canada. Our professions are a huge part of what makes us who we are. If we can't be who we are, that can influence how we experience change. And the impact can be really difficult on individuals and families settling in a new country. When we look at the cultural iceberg and consider how it applies to identity, the things that we see and hear are above the waterline. We sometimes call them the 4 F's of culture: food, flags, festivals, fashion. These are the surface things that we can see, but our identity is also made up of everything that is below the surface that we may not realize. And those are the things that have the most impact on our settlement experience. Our profession is only one example. The greetings we engage in is part of our culture. When I was growing up, it was considered rude to stick your tongue out at others. The values that I hold behind that behavior is you shouldn't do it because it means something negative. But there are cultures in the world where that's not a negative experience and is actually used in a greeting. What if you came across someone who said hi and then stuck their tongue out at you? How would you react? Maybe that seems unimportant or silly to you because it seems odd. But here's another example. In Canada, we often say, "Hi, how are you?" But what we really mean is hi. We aren't always concerned with how someone else really is.
Good morning.
Oh, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm good, thank you.
Have a nice day.
In other cultures, when someone asks you how you're doing, you stop, you take time to talk to them, and they share with you how they really are. Newcomers to Canada don't always realize that when we ask them how they are, we don't really mean that part. It's just an extension of saying hi for us. They might start to tell us how they are, we get uncomfortable, and we try to excuse ourselves and maybe get away. A newcomer quickly learns that we're not really that interested in how they're doing. This can cause confusion. They can understand the words we said, but not what we really meant. And then they start to question what else they're not understanding correctly. The concepts below the waterline in the iceberg are more difficult to articulate or explain, and this is where we don't often realize that the nature of what we have absorbed as part of our culture, heritage, our beliefs, or our values. Page 4 in your workbook has more information on cultural norms and values and how different cultures interact. When we consider how others engage in life, and when those things are not normal here, we can start to understand why people struggle in the process of resettlement and integration into a new community. Even when someone researches to prepare for change, they don't always realize the underlying way of life, and that can be hard to figure out. Organizations and people experience change in much the same way. There are a series of transitions. It's not a direct line or a path from the moment of change until the commitment to the change. And adapting to that process involves time and normally has a dip in our ability to cope. Interestingly, the change curve is very similar to the culture shock curve. In the same way that we experience change, newcomers also experience culture shock. It's not a direct path to adapting to a new country, community, job, or life, and there's always a dip in our ability to cope with the changes. Many people choose the path of resettlement for their families and struggle through the process their entire lives, moving from regression to recovery and never achieving that final sense of belonging. They feel that as long as their loved ones find a better life, it's good enough. Both of these curve models are very similar to the grief cycle. Resettlement in a new home can cause deep feelings of grief, even when we choose to make that change. Have you ever moved? Perhaps from one neighborhood to another? Any change, even good changes we initiated, or changes that others have thrust upon us, all cause us to navigate the change curve, the culture shock curve, and the grief curve simultaneously. Some move through the stages faster, and some more slowly, just like when we folded our arms and then folded them the other way. When we layer the experience of change and culture shock and grief together, the impact can be profound on the ability of someone to integrate into a new community. Difficulty for newcomers is not only exacerbated by the shock and grief that they may be experiencing, but at times they're faced with hostility because of misunderstandings, untruths, or half-truths. Take a few minutes to review the myths we've included in your workbook and consider how what we believe about the experience of newcomers can influence their settlement experience. If we think that newcomers come to Canada for free, then we might also believe that they should be happy for any work at any rate of pay. When we realize that economic immigrants need to have available settlement funds in the bank to come and settle in Canada, and that asylum seekers need to repay travel loans beginning a year after they arrive in Canada, we start to see that their financial needs are not that different from anyone else. Equity, diversity, and inclusion are important, so we learn more about the struggles of our newcomer neighbors and coworkers. But building awareness doesn't change things. So what should we do? We start by learning more about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we realize that knowing is not enough. We must do something. When we do something, we support justice. When we say that we would like everyone to have a sense of belonging, what do we really mean? If we had everything we need, health and safety, family and friends, enough money for the things that we want and need, freedom of self and religion, food that we like and know, happiness. What would we have? A good life, a sense of belonging. I've asked students, newcomers, people all over the Pembina Valley, and employees in different organizations, this is belonging. Everyone generally comes up with the same list. Do you have the same sense of belonging? What about your newcomer neighbor? We are all responsible for building welcoming and inclusive communities. We are all responsible for learning about those factors that improve belonging and support positive integration into a new home. Our understanding and support will help to reduce the misunderstandings that can cause discrimination as newcomers settle. We shared this chart in the guide. Go through this in your guide and mark the areas where you know you influence newcomer experience and areas where you can influence understanding and reduce discrimination experiences. We're in this together. How has this video helped you gain knowledge about equity, diversity, and inclusion? Has it increased your awareness? Did you learn something that maybe you didn't know before? What about understanding? Do you think about something differently than maybe you did before this workshop? And what about your skills and abilities? Do you have some ideas or tips that you can use when working or living alongside newcomers? Please visit our website. Use the QR code in our participant guide to complete a brief survey to help us improve these resources. Thanks for spending this time with me and for your interest and effort in helping build communities that are welcoming and inclusive.